love the way that it looks, but honestly, it's quite difficult to read.
Wait, you actually use these to tell the time too? Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm sitting here with a good friend and watch collector, Alan.
Hi Derek, thanks for having me.
So Alan, I see we got a bunch of watches here from your collection and we have a theme going on. But before we get into that, how would you describe yourself?
I would say I'm a casual sort of watch enthusiast slash collector, depending on what you qualify as collector, I guess, but just love in general mechanical watches and automatic watches.
So let's start off with the watch that's on your wrist.
Oh yeah.
Because that one actually looks the most different from everything else here.
It does.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about that one?
Sure. So this is the only gold watch I have at the moment, and it's essentially the 50th anniversary celebration of the Apollo 11. It's called the 50th Anniversary Moonshine, and it's basically modeled off of the original 1969 watch that was given to all the astronauts, and I actually think Nixon received one engraved as well.
I think so.
Yeah, so it's modeled off of that watch, and yeah, I love this piece.
Would you say this one gets the most wear time out of everything you have here?
You know, honestly, the most wear time probably is the sort of equivalent of it, or the same. It's the 50th anniversary steel version of the Apollo 11. So that one I think I wear the most, just because it's a little bit more understated when I wear it for work and stuff like that. It's not too flashy and eye-catching. So that one I think I wear the most, and then maybe the second to that is this watch, just because I wear it on the weekends when I go out and stuff like that. I just really love the way it looks and it feels on my wrist.
The cool thing about you having both versions of the 50th anniversary is that you have one on one side, the one that commemorates, you know, the success of the Apollo 11, so the gold version, and then you have the stainless steel version, which uses the same movement, came out around the same time when the watch was announced, and this one has a totally different bracelet. It has like the more original flat link style bracelet. You know, sometimes when you get watches from the same kind of collection, when it comes out, they are basically the same thing, just one gold, one steel. But I think there's enough to justify why you have, and you should collect both versions.
I know,
because they're totally different.
They are totally different, and I love both for its own sort of reasons, right? This one has a lot more sort of, I don't know if I would say gimmicks to it, but there's a lot of more commemorative type features with the 11 at the 11 o'clock, Buzz Aldrin on the sub-dial, and even on the back you have his footprint and then the actual famous quote as well, right? So it just feels like it's more of a watch where it's commemorating and showing off a lot of the details, whereas the gold one is a lot more, you know, quote-unquote understated, because it doesn't have a ton of different things on the dial itself, but on the back it does have some nice features. Yeah, I think when I first saw both, I knew I kind of wanted both.
And even on the gold case back here, I like that they did a photorealistic size of both the moon and also the Earth parallel to each other. That circles the movement. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the moon is actually made out of a piece of meteorite to get that kind of color and shimmer.
Yeah, it is. So it's really cool what they did, which is to make, like you said, the accuracy of the size of the moon to the Earth. I just think it's really nice to be able to see, and plus you get to see the actual movement itself, which they finished in gold plating. So yeah, it just looks really cool.
I remember when this first came out, it was already a huge moment because obviously the watch is freaking gorgeous. It really pops when it's on your wrist. And it was the first time that Omega had announced a Meta-certified Moonwatch caliber. So instead of the 1861, now it upgraded to the 3861. And a small thing that, you know, watch nerds will appreciate is there's a stop second now. So when you pull the crown, the small second will stop. It's so small, but it's such a nice detail, especially, you know, for someone like you who's had many different versions of chronographs. I'm sure little details like that don't go unnoticed. You're like, oh, dang, I wish they did that for everything now.
I do. And when I wear some of the other ones, being that they are mostly manual watches, I do have to adjust it every time I put it back on. And having that stop second is so nice to have. I wish the other ones do have it as well, but unfortunately they don't. So
which of these do you think is the one that started your, your appreciation for chronographs?
Chronographs. I'd probably say it's the Zenith. It's my first chronograph that I got, and this particular one is really interesting for me because when I first saw Zenith, when I first started collecting, I wanted to have something that was more of a, manufacturer type watch that only sort of watch people knew about. And Zenith is one of those brands that there's just so much history behind it. And this particular one, the El Primero 410 limited edition, is modeled off of one of their prototype watches that, interestingly, when I was reading and looking into watches at the time, I saw that Zenith actually purchased the original prototype that they put out and purchased it from an auction and used that as a basis to create this limited edition. So it's got a gray dial similar to the prototype, the 2 stars at 10 and 2, and just has the calendar and the moon phase as well.
In general, even today, it's kind of uncommon to see full calendar complication stacked with chronographs. And Zenith was still able to do it, keep the watch still pretty proportional. Like, it doesn't actually wear that thick on the wrist.
It doesn't, yeah.
Despite it, it's a little bit larger size at 42 millimeter, but wears great. And I can see a lot of Zenith still has that same kind of DNA. I'm actually wearing also Zenith today, the 38 millimeter collective edition. And so even both of these side by side, there's so much similarity. But I really like the full calendar complication that they put here because it's kind of uncommon, and it kind of reminds me of a thing I read online a lot. And it's the funniest thing. People online will say that the chronograph is the most useless complication ever made. And then I find it even funnier because whoever wrote that, if you showed them this, you're like, not only do you have a chronograph, you have a full calendar that tells you the month, the day, the moon phase. But I love that. Something that I see here, you have multiple chronographs. A lot of people, when they start collecting, myself included, we check off boxes. I got to get a dress watch. I need a diver. I need a reader. What was it for you that said, hey, I need 8 different kinds of chronographs?
And I don't know. I feel like I'm not going to stop on collecting the chronographs too, because one of my grails is also a chronograph. I don't know. I just think in general, the chronographs have such a nice symmetry, and I love the idea of, it measuring speed and distance. So for me, it was always an interesting thing because I love cars too. So it was always cool to see that you can actually measure the distance and how fast you're traveling in that particular distance with time, right? So yeah, that's really what the tachometer is really designed for. And obviously with all these different chronographs, everything is all very symmetrical with the exception of the Zenith, which is hilariously looking at this. It's at 4:30.
The 4:30 window.
But everything else is just so symmetrical, even the gray side, right? The data's at 6 o'clock. So the symmetry of it, the 3-dial look, I feel like it's just that classic sort of chronograph look, which I really love.
Have you ever considered chronographs outside of Zenith and Omega? Brands?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, obviously the Daytona pops to mind, right? But also one of my watches that I really would love to have is the overseas chronograph. So that one is probably right now at the top of my list.
Nice.
Yeah. The Panda dial. I just love the Panda dial in general.
I mean, speaking of Panda dial, I noticed you also have that in the OMEGA CK2998.
Yeah.
This one was a watch, I remember it came out, I think around 2018. I saw it at Baselworld when they still had the fair, and it was one of my favorite launches that year. And of course, when it came out, my first thought was, why does it have to be limited edition? Because now I don't have a chance to get it because, our store would only get a really small handful. And it's never a good day when I'm wearing something that someone is waiting to get. So I didn't get to get one for myself. Yeah, I love the color scheme on this. Just classic. It's clean. It has that Panda dial layout, red, white, and black. And I noticed that they changed the tachometer or tachymeter for pulsometer, which makes it already so different than what it is.
Very much so. A lot of watches back then, when you buy them, you can kind of choose depending on, I mean, these are tool watches, right? You can kind of choose what you want the bezel to be. And for a doctor, a pulsometer makes more sense. They can just measure heartbeat based on it. And so when they came out with this watch as a limited edition, they decided to put on a pulsometer rather than a tachyometer. So I thought it was really cool. And still, it's a very kind of racing type culture behind the chronograph. So the original bracelet is actually got drilled holes on it. like the racing style. So yeah, I mean, I just think it's a really cool piece.
I also like that they used this case shape. I think that's where the name CK2998 comes from, but a lot of people will know it as the first Omega in space case. And you'll see it's a little bit smaller than the 42 Moonwatch size. It's 39.7, and the lugs are a little bit more long, elongated, not as curved. And you typically get alpha hands as opposed to like the Speedmaster hands that you get.
Yeah, and it's also, I mean, the case is actually symmetrical versus the actual or the regular sort of professional Moonwatches where they have crown guards.
Yeah.
And it changes the proportions a little bit where it's a little wider on the right by the crown guard. So this is actually fully symmetrical.
I really like it. And I like that you used a flat link bracelet. So it actually looks period correct. Like, I actually thought it was OEM for a second, but then I realized that it's not. And, but honestly, it matches so well.
It does, and I was looking for it because I typically don't wear my watches with the strap, as you can see here. A lot of the ones that I have here does come with like a leather strap. Same with this watch. Generally speaking, I like to replace it with either a NATO band or a bracelet, and I got this bracelet to really match the period correct kind of look. I think the flat link looks really nice.
So I'm curious, when did you get the Sapphire Sandwich Speedmaster? Like, did that come before the limited ones, or?
No, well, actually, yes, that did come before. So these two watches were my first foray into Omega. I was on a trip to Europe, and I ended up buying both of these watches while I was.
So you bought the gray side and the Sapphire Sandwich in one trip.
Yep.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I just decided, you know what, let's just do it. I couldn't decide. I really loved the gray side, and I think originally I was going to buy the gray side.
Yeah.
But then I saw the Moonwatch, and I'm like, I can't have a Moonwatch without a Moonwatch.
Like the classic version at that time.
Yeah. So I ended up just buying both at the same time.
So nice you had to have it twice.
Yeah, honestly, I almost had 3 because, because there's a story behind that.
Well, you got more now.
Well, I definitely have more now. But originally when I went, I was in Italy, and in the first sort of Omega shop I went into, they had the 45th anniversary Apollo 11. And I didn't want to get it because I thought, I was going to travel to other cities, and eventually I wanted to stop off and buy it at the last city I was in. So I was like, you know what, let me just hold off. And that was a big mistake because I couldn't get this one for a really long time.
Dang.
But luckily I ended up adding it to my collection. So
so let's talk a little bit about this one then.
Sure.
This is the 45th anniversary of the Apollo 11, and this one comes in a full brushed titanium case. And it still has like this Sedna gold accents going on the dial along with the bezel. What was it about this one that you really liked?
Man, this was the 45th anniversary. And the original thought was that they wanted to use laser to engrave the dial to make it look more like the surface of the moon. And so they used some material, and I can't remember what, but they used a laser to actually engrave it, so you can see none of the actual subdials have any print on them. They're just laser engraved out and then applied indices for the markers. Right? So
I see that.
It's just completely cut out from a single piece of the dial using the laser. And if you rotate it around, you can actually see that it reflects light, even though when you look straight on at it, it's just completely matte, which is such a cool feature that I hadn't, thought that this was just something that was so interesting. And they haven't made a titanium Speedmaster before this. At least I don't think they did. So I thought this was really cool to have in my collection. Everything else, if you look at all the other ones, they're all printed. All the Speedmasters are printed, and this is the only one that's actually cut into the dial. And like I said, I just love how they did the reflections on it. When you just look straight at it, you almost can't make out anything written on the dial.
Yeah.
But when you rotate it, you can see that it's, it reflects light.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how they did it, but it looks really cool.
Actually, yeah, that's really cool. It almost has like a rainbowish effect when you move the dial around to get the light from the indices there.
Yeah.
And I really like the gray side of the moon you have here. Yeah. This is actually, so out of that whole series, whatever side of the moon, there's dark sides, and then there's only one gray side. But, Omega has made the dark side of the moon, the vintage black, the black.
The black.
They have like so many different versions of doing, all black ceramic. But then this is the only one where they have the gray side. And personally, I would love to see Omega play more with this kind of dial color, because I love that they use like that platinum dial to create that very monotone gray,
Yeah.
lunar gray dust kind of look to it.
Yeah, it's very like sort of gray dust is a great way to sort of describe it. So yeah, they used a platinum dial cut out so that it looks like there's little bits of dust on it. And it's really cool because when I wear this in the daylight, in the sun, it almost shines, it's almost white. It doesn't look gray at all. But when you're indoors, depending on the lighting, it looks sometimes dark gray, sometimes light gray. So it just changes and it sort of absorbs and reflects light very differently depending on the environment that you're in.
Yeah, and out of all the ones you have here of the Speedmasters, I find this one the most different because the layout is a dual register subdial, and this one has a completely different movement. Plus, it's automatic, actually.
It's automatic, and it's also using the coaxial escapement. So yeah, there's a lot going on for, I think, was this the first coaxial escapement? I think it might have been.
I can't remember.
Yeah.
All I remember, though, is I love that it has a jumping hour feature.
Yeah.
The date window.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Because personally, I love jumping hour feature, you know, on GMT watches, but I love it more when it's on a watch that you don't expect to have it.
Yeah.
Just because when you're actually traveling, it's so much more convenient. And usually for me, like why I like chronographs, I actually like to time a lot of random things I do throughout my day. Like
Same. Yeah.
driving from here to there, I'll time it for no reason. One of my pet peeves when it comes to chronographs is I love it when chronographs can count more than 1 hour.
Yeah.
Preferably 12 hours is like good amount of time.
Yes.
Do you have any kind of, like, when you look at chronographs, do you have anything in your head that's like a checklist, like, I want it to have this, or do you just like the style and look of chronographs? Like, talk me through your kind of mindset.
I think I just like the look of it, and I love the idea that everything is so symmetrical, and the classic chronograph look is the 3 subdial. And when Omega put out the gray side of the moon and the dark side of the moon, they combined it into 2 registers, but still maintain the 12-hour sort of timing mechanism.
Yeah, it's hidden under the other hand.
Exactly. So within a single subdial, you have the minutes and the hours for 12 hours. So you almost have a secondary clock inside here, which is really cool. So you can, I almost want to say you can use this as like potentially a second sort of location or something. I don't know. I'm not sure. You can probably use this as a GMT at some point. But in any case, like I don't have a specific requirement. For me, it's really just me liking the way that watch looks as the dial. And I like sometimes some interesting kind of dials that are out there. And for me, this collection is, though similar, it's kind of a take and variation on things that I think are interesting.
Is there anything you would change about the Speedmaster? Like if you were allowed to build your own Speedmaster or chronograph, what would that be for you?
I don't know. I don't know if I have any thoughts about changing it. I personally just really like the way they look. Again, it goes back to the symmetry, the way they sit on your wrist. I mean, I think Omega has done a really amazing job with keeping the Speedmaster and modernized it from what they've put out throughout the years, and I think they should just keep going.
So I'll throw some random hot takes at you from people.
Sure.
Every time I see people talk about Speedmasters, there's always like the same comments that come up.
Yeah.
So let's talk about first the 5-bar water resistance, right? Mm-hmm. That's a huge thing. A lot of people debate about 5-bar water resistance online. Like you cannot be friends. Like it's either you're right or wrong. I have my own story with a Speedmaster with 5-bar water resistance. You know, obviously Omega and anywhere you read online will say you should not submerge these.
I would.
You would not? Okay, I would not either.
Yeah.
What do you think? Do you think Omega should increase the water resistance to 10 bar? Does that even change anything for you, or?
It doesn't. I mean, they can, but I personally don't trust anything that doesn't have a screw down crown to go into water. I've had a Hamilton that was 100 meters or something like that, and I ended up going snorkeling with it and got water inside.
Oh, dang.
And that wasn't a screw down crown, so I just don't trust anything that's not a screw down crown. If it's not designed to go in water with a screw down crown, I'm not bringing it into water. It's fine for you to wash your hands, and that's kind of the design of these. You can wash your hands and not worry about it getting into the movement, but I wouldn't submerge these.
So if you were to go into water now, what would you bring with you?
Oh,
not something here.
No, not something here. I have a Tudor Black Bay 58, and I wear that.
Grail Watch.
Yeah, as my sort of travel watch when I know that there may be water pool or something like that I need to go into, and that's kind of what I wear. I also have a Seiko That's also a dive watch that I really love, and I wear that sometimes when I travel. So those are the watches that I would bring into like a pool and submerge them and be comfortable submerging them.
Next hot take, the 12 o'clock marker on all the Speedmasters.
Yep.
Some people say that it resembles a kind of symbol
Yes.
of pride, we can call it.
Phallic symbol.
Phallic symbol. What do you think about that when people say that?
I don't care. I think it just looks awesome. I mean, it's their design from the start, and some of them are more prominent than others, but in general, I love that. And with the Snoopy, you can see that it's actually applied as well, which is kind of cool. And so it's this one.
I feel like that question popped in my head because I started staring at the Snoopy tile more, and I'm like, wow, it's really pronounced. It's really pronounced there.
It is.
It's actually in blue too. It's like blue.
Some would think of it. It could be a middle finger. But whatever.
Okay, yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah.
But that
middle
one
finger to their competitors.
Definitely looks like a very prominent sort of phallic symbol.
You know, since we're talking about the Snoopy, let's just go into this one. This is the 50th anniversary of the Apollo 13.
Yep.
I did a little research before our show just to get myself what's called up to date on NASA and Snoopy, not just with Omega.
Yep.
And apparently, Omega and Snoopy's partnership started from the Apollo 10 missions, which was back in like May of 1969. And I think you probably know a little bit about that too.
Yeah, I mean, so they originally sort of with Apollo 10 were scouting out locations for the Apollo 11 to land on the moon. And so the lunar module, they called it was kind of snooping around for the landing location, and they decided to call the lunar module the Snoopy, and then the actual sort of command center, or the command module, the Charlie Brown. So that was an interesting snippet of detail, and that's how they started using the Snoopy sort of name.
So that was started from Apollo 10,
Yep.
And then this one is the Apollo 13. I think a lot of people are familiar with this story that, you know, obviously Omega has told many times through different Snoopy editions. Sure. But the short story is that for the Apollo 13 mission, you know, the number 13 already being like an unlucky kind of folklore number.
Sure, yeah.
And it was a successful failure because the astronauts, you know, one of the engines blew out on their...
It was actually an oxygen tank that I think blew out, and they ended up having to basically shut down all systems except life support to get them back. So obviously they missed the moon, they couldn't land on the moon, but just to get them, the astronauts, back home, it was a pretty gnarly mission.
So then this part I know, when they were re-entering, they had to basically do like a slingshot maneuver to get back to Earth's orbit.
Yep.
They used their Speedmasters. It was to calculate the exact amount of seconds. I think it was around like 14 seconds, which on the Snoopy 45th edition, or some people call this Silver Snoopy 2, you can actually see that in a comic strip. It says, how did you do in 14 seconds?
Yeah.
So how do you think this Snoopy edition stacks up with the other Snoopies that Omega has done?
It's funny because when I originally saw the release of the 45th anniversary Snoopy, I thought it was a bit too comic, right? It looked childish. I regret not picking that up. But now that I look at it, it's such an interesting piece. But this one, to me, feels a bit more mature in the way that it looks. So it's kind of like a Panda dial. It's blue in color, so it's less childish, but you still have the cool details with the Snoopy inside the subdial in the spacesuit. And on the back, it's a little bit gimmicky, but there is the moon with the Earth that's tied to the second hand, so it rotates when you kick off the chronograph. And there's also a little moon module or space module that Snoopy rides in as it kind of circles the moon, which is cool.
Yeah, I've actually been a huge fan of Omega utilizing the case back to do these kind of fun animations. I think it's such a clever use, especially for a limited edition. I mean, the movement for this watch based off the 3861 caliber is already beautiful to look at, but you already get that with so many different versions. So here it's cool that, hey, let's make like a, you know, the spinning Earth, which is linked to the small seconds. And then, you know, when the chronograph starts, that's when Snoopy orbits around the moon.
Which every 60 seconds it makes one rotation.
That's super cool. I like that they also use a white dial because in general, white dial chronographs or even sports watches are a little bit more uncommon. Usually sport watches, you know, watches made for a specific instrument or tool usually has a darker dial with white accents, like something for great legibility. But I think making it in white makes it special. To my mind already, obviously the Snoopy comes to mind, but even like the Rolex Daytona, you know, the one that everyone wants is the white dial with the black ceramic bezel. So there's something about using that color scheme that's always like pops.
Yeah, and I think that makes a sort of legibility better as well, right? So you can easily read it. That's why the original one with the Moonwatch has these white hands. Everything on the dial with the black dial and white contrast makes it very easy for you to read things, and same with this, right? So everything's just easier to read. Whereas if you look at the 45th anniversary, I love the way that it looks, but honestly, it's quite difficult to read unless you're in the right angle, right? So
wait, you actually use these to tell the time too?
I do. It's funny that you say that, because when I wear my watch, I sometimes look at it, most of the time with obviously cell phones and things like that, right? Smartphones. I use my smartphone to look at the time, but when I don't wear my watch, I feel naked, and I also keep looking at my wrist.
Oh yeah, what time it is. That happens to me all the time.
Yeah, so it's really weird. When you're wearing it, you're almost not looking at the time, but then when you don't wear it, you're looking for that time.
It's so funny because like when I get home, I'm like wearing a watch all day. I'll get home and I'll take off whatever watch I'm wearing, and I'll take another watch out of my watch box and wear that around the house.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, I gotta like do chores, so now I'm gonna wear my Vieta watch. I'll wear my Seiko, and like I think that's just part of collecting. Like, and plus, hey, you know, you already spent your money on it. I want to wear it, and you know, we both genuinely enjoy watches.
Yes.
The stories, the functions, the style, everything that goes with it. So like, yeah, I love wearing watches like 24/7. I want to be able to wear a watch for every occasion I do, with the exception of like, you know, anything high contact or whatever.
Yeah, me too. So I do also wear some of my G-Shocks at home and stuff like that. And when I'm playing sports or going out, stuff like that, I wear the G-Shock.
I got another hot question for you. If you had to choose one chronograph to keep on this table right now, everything else has to go, which one would you keep?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I think if I had to just keep one, I'll probably keep the Moonshine. I think this one is so interesting and different, and I love the weight of it on my wrist. When I wear it, I feel it, and it's a nice feeling to have. And it's just such a different sort of classic looking watch, but really a sort of a modern take on a classic. I just love the way that it looks.
I would second that opinion too. You have different mixes of materials here, like titanium, ceramic, stainless steel, obviously, and then you have moonshine gold. But like, I think when you got this watch, it was several years ago, and the gold, you know, with Omega's alloy, they say it's not supposed to lose color or luster over time.
Yep.
And it's really cool that they did it in a very matte finish. Yeah. A lot of times when you see gold watches, they have like a lot of high polish. It's cool because this is almost like a muted gold color. And that's already, the gold is already attractive, but making it muted, it makes it a little bit more, I don't know, like toolish.
Yeah.
Which is, it's like, it doesn't make sense, but that's kind of why it looks, is so cool to have.
Yeah, and it does seem more sort of muted because, as you said, it is brushed. If it was high polished, then it'd just be too flashy, right?
Yeah.
And I think Omega did some very interesting things with the 50th anniversary, both the steel and the moonshine. The bracelet that you see here is tapered. I think this is the first time they started doing the taper bracelet. Yeah. Same with the 50th. Even though it's sort of a flat link, it's also tapered as well. And on the clasp itself, it includes the actual Omega symbol, which then they started to do for other ones as well, right? So you can see it here on the 50th anniversary Apollo 11. And I think the new bracelets for the new regular moon watches, the Speedmasters, also have this sort of look in terms of that bracelet.
I like that on the Apollo 50th anniversaries, the Apollo 11 50th anniversaries, they use the old Omega logo.
Yeah.
So I noticed that on the dial, like the applied logo, it's a little bit more elongated. And then also just the way they write the word Speedmaster, the R curves off a lot more.
Yeah, that's right.
So I like that, those kind of like little nods. And of course you have things like dot over 90, which a lot of people, you know, find really attractive for Speedmasters from that period. And you see over time Omega is starting to like listen to what people really want with their collection and starting to make those little improvements here and there. Oh, did you already talk about your Grail watch?
Yeah, we talked about the
overseas.
Overseas.
Is that your Grail?
At the moment, yeah.
At the moment, okay.
I wanted the AP, but you know, as I wore the AP and tried it on my wrist, I have a few friends that have it. You have one as well, and I feel like though I really like the way it looks, I don't know if it sits on me as nicely as I want or as if I prefer. I ultimately really like the circular look.
Yeah.
And with the AP, it's such an iconic sort of look with the different was it hexonic?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The bolts on the front of the.
Yeah, the bolts on.
Yeah.
And I think with the overseas, it just fits sort of my aesthetic a bit more.
Oh, I might as well throw this question in. When Swatch and Omega did their MoonSwatch, like, what did you think about that?
I thought it was really interesting. At first, I wanted to collect every single one of them, but obviously it just took too much effort to even get a hold of them. So I ended up just getting the Mars watch.
Yeah.
And as they became more available, a bunch of my friends wanted them, so I helped them source them. But so I actually have had a few of them in my hands to compare and look at. I think they're really cool. I know we talked about this when they first released it. I was wondering if it was going to affect sort of the value of my actual Moonwatches, but overall, I think what they did for the brand and just bringing exposure overall to the Moonwatch and the idea behind the moon landings and all that, I think it's fine.
You're right. It's like such a long process just to buy the watch.
Yeah.
And I feel like, you know, as weird as it is to say, that is the fun of collecting that watch.
Yep.
But after you have it, it's like obviously nothing compares to like having the real Speedmaster. It's like the only time I wear my MoonSwatch is like if I go to a concert or something, and I just want to have a watch on my wrist, like I said. Yeah. But I don't really want to have something I'm going to be worried about if like you know, if anything happens.
Yeah, I mean, I rarely wear it. Once in a while I'll wear it, but it's just a fun sort of toy to have.
Yeah.
Like you said, just to have something on the wrist. But yeah, the ownership experience and the feel of it is not nearly the same as having these watches.
So I think I have one last kind of question for you. If someone were to start buying watches or, you know, just wanted to start looking for watches, what advice would you give? What advice do you give to your own friends when they're saying, hey, Alan, like, I'm looking to buy my first watch, you know, how should I go about it?
I think just buy the watch that really speaks to you, one that you think you'll wear every day, because ultimately, if it's something that you're not going to wear every day, then really what's the point of having it? And just so some of my friends who decided to get a watch, their first time watch, they're like very protective and they don't want to wear it all the time. And I tell them, just wear it, because really the joy of it is having it on your wrist, right? So whatever watch you end up deciding to go with, just make sure it's one that you really love and just enjoy it as much as you can.
So basically no safe queens for the first one. Yeah.
No, I wouldn't. I mean, even if I decide to buy, like, as my first watch, a Grail watch, I'm going to wear that and show it all the time. Yeah. Because I want to wear a watch.
Yeah, dude, I love that. Thanks so much for being on the show, and thanks for sharing your collection and kind of diving into the mind of someone who loves chronographs. The most useful complication out there, I should say. Yeah, because I love chronographs too.
I do.
But anyways, thanks so much for tuning in. Subscribe if you love watches, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye.
Bye.